Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Cameras and Coffee. Today, so yesterday I was going to do one of these, and I had spent all weekend planning out a really nice video. I was going to talk about why Pentax should stick with the DSLR and completely avoid ever touching mirrorless ever again. And then on, Sunday, Petapixel released the exact same article, beat me to the punch, and good on them. Every point they make in this article is fantastic. I agree. It was written by Usman Dawood. I agree with everything he says in the article throughout. I think he hit the nail on the head multiple times in this. There's a link to the article in the description so you can read it. And since he did as good a job or better than I could making this point, I had nothing to talk about yesterday. So then along came a package from Lomography. And you might remember some number of weeks ago I talked about Lomography reaching out and asking if I wanted to sample test one of their films before it went to market. And going to jump on that, yeah. I didn't know which one they were going to send me. They sent me Fantome 8, which is a black and white film. Package got a little bit beat up during transit, and it is 8 ISO, and it's a kino film, so I believe that means that it's a movie film that's been repurposed for still use. Expiration on this is 5/23, so looks like this stuff's got a shelf life around about 3 years. Which is pretty good. Packaging's really nice, a little bit crushed, but the sample photos on it are interesting. There are 2 sample photos on the packaging. There's a portrait of a person that is very high contrast with some gray tones, a very cinematic looking image. And then there is a super high contrast picture of the Brooklyn Bridge. So, haven't actually looked at the film yet. So, one roll, 35 millimeter, and it's got, yes, it does have, the perfs on it are cinema style, motion stock perfs. And it's in the new plastic style of cassette. I'm not sure if these are reusable yet. I haven't had one of these in black and white that I've tried to open, so we'll find out. Now I guess it's just time to go out and shoot some random stuff. So, no, in all seriousness, since I've had some time to think about this, I knew I was going to get either an 8 ISO or a 13 ISO film. Both of them really, really slow. So I had time to put together a plan of what I'm going to do. And my goal, of course, is to give Lomography some photos that they can actually use in marketing. I think that would be really neat. To see what, at least, even if it's just one of my photos end up as a marketing shot, I think that would be very cool. So I have a plan for what I'm going to do with this. And just in case there's any other film testers out there, I'm not going to tell you exactly what it is, but I will tell you that I'm going to pop this in my Olympus OM4T and carry that around with me for the next month. So that's going to be a lot of fun. With slow ISO films, let's talk generally about how to shoot slow ISO films. I've shot a bunch. ADOC CMS 20, RPX 25 is another one, and also one that most people will never have access to. I picked up a 2,000-foot spool some years ago of Kodak 2383 interpositive film. It's either I can never remember if it's interpositive or internegative. Developing it like T-Max, it has an ISO of 1.6, which is really hard to use. So, and very few cameras can actually use it. You have to have a full manual camera and the ability to mentally calculate the exposure difference from the lowest ISO. So if you have a full manual camera, you can use it. If your camera only goes down to 25 ISO, then 12, 6, 3, 1.6, you've got to mentally add 4 stops of light from the meter reading. Same thing's going to be true with either the Fantome 8 ISO or the 13 ISO, because I don't know of any cameras that go down to 12. There might be a few out there. Forget what the OM4T's bottom ISO is, but whatever it is, I'm going to have to mentally add light. That's fine. So that's the technical portion of it. If you know how many additional stops of light you need and your camera says 1/125th at f/5.6, you've either got to slow down your shutter or open up your aperture to compensate. So the creative side of shooting slow ISO films is that they are generally super, super high contrast. And interestingly, the two sample shots they have here, the Brooklyn Bridge shot, which is very high contrast, does have a nice gradient in the image. And then the portrait, which is also very high contrast, does have some retained gray tones and some retained shadow details. So motion stock tends to be a little bit more receptive to shadow detail and things like that at slow speeds. So I'm hopeful that this will not be as contrasty as the ADOX. That's my hope. And I guess we'll find out in a little bit if I'm right. As for when the All About film for this is coming out, bug me in like 18 months. It takes me around 30 to 70 rolls of film to get enough photos to make one of those videos. And this stuff's not even on the market yet, so it's going to be a long time before I finish that video. But when I send my images into Lomography, I will share them on this channel, at least the good ones. I share plenty of my bad work too. I don't know why I'm being picky now. So you guys can see how it performs. I'm really excited to use this film. The next thing I wanted to talk about is the exciting world of cinema lenses. Much different world than still lenses. Cinema lenses are engineered to a whole higher level spec than still lenses, and in a different way. So, just popped up on my news feed over the weekend an article from Cinema 5D, and there's again a link below in the description. It's by Jakub or Han, I'm not sure, I would assume Han. And it's titled Entaniya Fisheye HAL 220, 220 degree field of view PL mount Cine lens. Apparently this company that makes this also has a 250 degree field of view fisheye lens. So this is a new Cine lens with a 220 degree field of view and a circular fisheye for REPL mount cameras. And you can change the size of the image circle for different formats with shims, and also zoom it out with spacers. So I have to imagine that changes the focus point, but I could be wrong. Cinema lenses operate much differently than anything I'm used to. So basically this is designed for VR lenses, 360 degree VR lenses. And it's nuts. I don't know how much it costs, but there are some, but it's designed, it does cover the sensor for RE and RED cameras, apparently. So good specs, 17 elements in 12 groups. Sounds like a very heavy lens. The aperture range is in T-stops from 2.9 to 16, which if it's f/2.8 to 16 means that that's really good light transmission. I couldn't find the f-stops in here, but that's pretty interesting. The image circle at 220 degrees is 22.6 to 29.8 millimeters. So it doesn't quite cover 35 millimeter, but it would cover most of the motion formats. And it would also work for 360 VR, which is what it's designed for. And it's what we would call in still images an intrusive camera, meaning you could not buy this and then just plunk it onto your DSLR without the mirror shattering, hitting the back element. I gotta imagine it would work on some mirrorless cameras, though some mirrorless cameras, the sensor has a surround that's a little bit in front of it, and like for instance on my Sony A5000, I can't use the intrusive fisheye, the Nikkor 8mm f8 intrusive fisheye, but I can use that on the Sony A7S II because there's this plastic bit that comes out in front of the sensor on the A5000. So not all mirrorless cameras would be able to use this if you got your hands on one and say an adapter from REPL to whatever mirrorless camera system you're using. And honestly, this is probably pretty expensive. If you're going to do that, just buy the 250-degree one and go crazy with that fisheye. So it got me thinking about, I'm working on a video about fisheyes, and it's around about a third of the way ready in terms of the images that I'm going to use in it. And that video is going to talk about how to use a fisheye, how to use it well, what happens when you use it incorrectly, tips and tricks, and then it's going to compare different fisheye lenses, circular versus full frame coverage, things like that. And but it got me thinking about how the VR market is going to be really dependent on fisheyes and ultra wides. And while that will primarily be for the video market, at some point VR, I got to imagine that it's going to be kind of a passing fad, that either it will be a passing fad and it will go away, or there will be a future of way better lenses than the ones that are being made today will come onto the secondhand market for semi-reasonable prices. So for people who enjoy fisheye and ultra-wide shooting, that future is really bright. VR is going to need that. There's going to be a lot of investment in making those lenses really good, and somebody out there, when they start hitting the secondhand market, will find a niche for building adapters so that they can be used on mirrorless cameras. And that would, of course, allow amateur VR photographers to work with them, but also still image photographers who are looking for really interesting ultra-wide lenses will be able to have access to those as well. So really, for those of you who like shooting ultra-wide, I suspect that 5 to 7 years from now, life's going to be very, very interesting. I know that's a long time to wait, but it'll come. And then the last thing I want to just share with you is an article from The Guardian called "The Loneliest Road Trip, Travels Through an Empty America in Pictures." And it's one of their curated photo albums. And I don't think they ever list who the actual author is or the editor in these. These photos are incredible. They have, check out this article. This really paints a picture of a sort of desolate America. The remnants of what used to be the heyday of road tripping in America. And well before my time, road tripping in America, I mean, it's always, America, for those of you who don't live here, is big. It's bigger than the portions that we feed ourselves. And if you've never been here, it's hard to really imagine how big it is. The Cannonball Run record was recently rebroken, shorter than 25 hours to drive across the country at an average speed of 190 miles an hour. Completely, or something very close to that. Completely not legal, but that should give you an idea of how long it takes to get across the country. It's hard to picture what 3,000 miles of road is like until you've actually done it. I've not driven across the country in one shot, but I have, in different stages, driven the entire length of the country multiple times. And the roads just keep coming. And that's on interstates. We're 80, 85 miles an hour, not in any way uncommon. And generally, if you're going 80, 85 miles an hour outside of a city on an interstate, somebody is passing you every few minutes at a good clip. So, but back in the day, going back further to the 40s, 50s, 60s, road tripping on blue line highways, which is my preferred road trip method, was huge. And there were all these little communities that popped up supporting the commerce on these blue line highways. What I mean by blue line highways is that if you look at a map, there's a really thick line, typically red, for the interstates, which are the major highways. And then the minor highways, which are usually U.S. highways. There are interstates, which are the biggest, U.S. highways, which are highways that go between states, but will have access points at every intersection, traffic lights, things like that. Interstates have limited access and no traffic lights. So the blue line highways are the second tier down, and then there's state highways and things like that. So when I say blue line highways, what I mean is a road that goes between states from town to town to town, lots of stop signs, lots of intersections. So generally, there are 2 lanes in each direction with lots of passing lanes. Sometimes if you get into the mountains, it'll go up to four lanes or 2 lanes in one direction so that people can pass the trucks that are struggling to get up the hills. At any rate, so there was this gigantic economy for decades supporting travel along the blue line highways. And road tripping across America was something, it was a rite of passage. Everyone did it. Remember when my brother finished high school, he and his buddies bought and fixed up a little bit a conversion van and drove from where we lived in Chicago out to Seattle, down the West Coast, and then back. I road tripped in college for 3 weeks as part of a field study from Chicago out to Grand Canyon, Monument Valley, Zion National Park, and Bryce Canyon. And then we came back. If you ever have an interest in visiting America, the best trip you can do is literally set aside a month. Get over here, rent a car, and this is, of course, assuming price is no object, and road trip. Find blue line highways because they're way more interesting to drive. And if time isn't an object, they're much prettier and much more interesting. You find little bits of surviving remnants of this old part of America, little roadside stands and things like that where you can get lunch that are generally pretty darn good. Places that sell homemade fudge or beef jerky, things like that. I say that having eaten 1,200 calories in homemade fudge after a hike this weekend. Totally worth it. Anyway, but that is, and then, so, and all of that is supports things like the national park system, the national forest system, and things like that. Little open spaces, regional parks, places to go hiking and exploring. And if you were to do something like fly into a hub like Denver or Salt Lake City, pick up a car and then just drive around the West and explore. Maybe say, I'm going to be in this hotel for a few nights and just find places around. You'll not be wanting for anything to do. There is so much to see, and no lifetime is long enough to take it all in. So, at any rate, that Guardian article has a bunch of really neat photos of what some of these places look like now. And it paints, I think, a little bit more desolate of a picture than is necessarily always the case, but with coronavirus, everybody's staying home generally. So the photos in it are amazing. Every one of them is jaw-droppingly good. And like I said, I couldn't find out who took them, but man, really good creative eye. And once again, the Guardian proves that they have the best photo editors in the industry. So that is basically what we have for today. Have a good day, everyone, and I'll see you in the next Cameras and Coffee.